I'm on a journey to grow as much of my own food as possible, and so here are 5 things I would do next year to grow even more food. All right, so the first change that I'm going to make next year is I'm going to grow more dried beans. I already grow quite a lot, but I think I'm going to grow even more. I have found that these are super easy to grow, and they don't really require any care throughout the season, unlike something like a tomato, which requires a lot of care. They're very easy to store and they're really protein rich. I think a mistake that I've made in the past in this area is telling myself that I just need to set aside more time or I need to be more dedicated to the garden in order to grow more food. And to a certain extent, you can do that. Like, as your garden grows, you will have to spend more time, but there is kind of an upper limit and you have to figure out what that is for you. You can't let yourself stay stuck in this mental cycle of I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing enough. If only I could do more, this would be more productive. There are other changes that you can make to grow more food without having to put in a whole lot more effort. All right, the second thing that I would do differently is I would dedicate more room to my winter squash. I have this one here, and then I also have some over here that are kind of hiding in the weeds in between my fruit trees. And in the past, I've really struggled with winter squash because of squash bugs and vine borers and other pests. And this year I am trying out some resistant varieties, and so far they are doing a good job. So I think I can safely dedicate more space to these in the future. Again, I will say winter squash is one of those things where you plant it, it doesn't take really a lot of care during the season, and then you just harvest it at the end and it just stores really well without you having to do anything. And so if I can bulk up on stuff like that, then it will be easier for me to grow a higher volume of food while still putting in the same amount of effort. All right, for change number 3, I want to talk about fats. So one of the things that people don't talk about when they talk about growing a lot of your own food is growing a fat source or an oil or something like that. And so I've been slowly experimenting with a bunch of different fat crops. Mainly peanuts is the one that I've done the last couple of years, and I'm thinking next year I do also want to expand out into sunflowers. I know sunflowers and sunflower seed oil was like a traditional fat source of people who lived in the Americas. I think it's also a really good choice for me because it is a native plant. So next year I'm going to be working on sunflowers and figuring out how difficult it is to get oil from them compared to how much time it takes to grow them. All right, and the 4th thing that I want to do differently next year is grow more of this. This is amaranth. It's a grain, it's an edible grain, and part of self-sufficiency and growing your own food is honestly growing a lot of grain. And so I've got one here, but I do really want to see what it's like to grow it kind of at a larger scale, what the harvesting looks like, processing, etc. And I'm doing this to like kind of narrow down what grain I might want to focus on in the future. So if you didn't know it already, this is actually part of my free garden planning course. It is all right here on YouTube, again, absolutely for free. And right now we're in the journaling portion. So back in the spring, I took you guys through a lot of planning out your garden, making sure that it is meeting your goals. And now we're kind of reflecting on, is the garden that we designed actually meeting our goals, and how would we change that plan for next year? So for me, because I'm trying to grow a lot of my own food, I'm looking at ways that I can do an even better job of growing my own food and change my plan to reflect that. So if you do want to go ahead and catch up on the rest of the course, I'll leave that link down below. All right, and so the 5th thing that I would change is I would actually grow fewer hot peppers. These are actually really easy to grow, which is why I think I've accidentally overdone it. I mean, and especially as a new gardener, it's like on the list of things that you grow. You grow tomatoes and you grow peppers and you grow cucumbers and all this stuff. And so there's a certain amount that you do need as far as making powders or even like a chili oil, things like that. But after a while, it just becomes too much. I have an embarrassingly large amount of dried peppers that I have had to throw out because they became like 2-3 years old, and I already had so many more coming in from the garden that I just couldn't justify holding on to the old ones, and they ended up becoming compost. And you know, it's a learning experience, but I do actually now have to learn from it and start planting fewer of these hot peppers, and especially because they are like a seasoning crop and not necessarily a food crop. Of course, the seasoning and the flavors are important, but the amount of space that they're taking up versus the amount of food that they produce, it's just not really, the math isn't mathing on that one. All right, so in your journal and in the comments, if you would like to share, I would love to know what you've learned from this year, what you already know that you want to do differently next year. I do think it's really important to do this in like the middle, late season, because if you wait until you're planning your garden next year, you're not gonna remember what you need to do differently. Like right now, it is all in your head, and you will be able to set yourself up to have a really good plan next year. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, happy gardening.